This episode of Startalk is brought to you by CuriosityStream.
So tonight, we're going to talk about the exploration of the universe and the search for life in that exploration and what impact that might have on us philosophically, culturally, religiously, on our artwork, and all that we are and define ourselves to be as humans. And let's bring out, oh yes, you like that. Good. So let's bring out one of my scientific guests, a colleague and a friend, in fact, a hometown native. Give a very warm welcome to Dr. Carolyn Porco. Carolyn! Carolyn Porco is a hometown native. She's a planetary scientist. She was head of the imaging science team of the Cassini mission to Saturn. If you saw any image of Saturn in the last 15 years, she did it. She and her team. I call her Madam Saturn.
Thank you. I love that.
It is my great pleasure to bring out a comedian, wonderful comedian from Wet Hot American Summer and many, many other things. Ladies and gentlemen, he has a new show called Debate Wars out on CISO. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Ian Black.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to go around.
Dude.
And from Saturday Night Live and Trainwreck, ladies and gentlemen, Vanessa Bayer!
And rounding this out, we can't do this. If we're going to talk about art, we need an artist. If we're going to talk about the impact of science on our lives, we need somebody who sits at that intersection. Give a very warm welcome to musician and artist Sean Ono Lennon. Sean.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's just get some basic science on the table. Carolyn, we went to Saturn.
We did indeed.
Did it in an awesome way.
Awesome.
We entered orbit back in 2004. And it's been going gangbusters since then.
Yes, it has.
Why go to Saturn?
Oh, wow. Where do I begin?
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll be a little more specific. What were you after? What did we not know about Saturn that you found out?
Well, let me back up and start at the beginning with the Voyager mission. Okay, the Voyager mission, we toured the outer solar system in the 1980s. And we had two spacecraft encounter Saturn in 1980 and 1981. And that was really the first time we ever got a glimpse of what the Saturnian system offered. So we got to see the surfaces of the satellites. We got to see the rings in some detail. And as these things often happen, it was just a wonderful exploration and journey of discovery and all those accolades you've heard. But they really leave us with other questions that we'd like to answer. And so as soon as the Voyager mission was over, everybody was deep into planning the next mission to return to Saturn, because that was considered the system, the planetary system. It is the planetary system that is the most phenomenologically rich. So it has Titan.
That means it's the most beautiful.
It's also the most beautiful. It's also the most beautiful. And I was in the privileged position of being responsible for the images that we returned. So I just very much wanted to make them beautiful.
Yeah, let's give it up. Yes. So you couldn't just send Cassini there. You needed some gravitational help, last I remembered.
And we got
so
it.
you launch it from Earth, and you don't have enough energy, enough propulsion to get it there. So you steal orbital energy from what?
Well, this is a maneuver that was found before going to Voyager. But if you fly a spacecraft by a planet, let's say, that is already moving, then depending on how you fly the spacecraft by the planet, you can actually take a little bit of momentum from that body. But because the planet's so big and the spacecraft is so small, you really give a big kick to the spacecraft. So in order to get to Saturn, we actually flew around the inner solar system for 2 years, kind of parked it there, building up speed. We flew by Venus twice, the Earth once.
And it never went back in time?
So you did a double slingshot around Venus.
Not around, we just flew by it.
Flew by, slingshot Venus, and you also slingshot Earth.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Now, did we just get, you just got lucky that you ended up on Saturn, or you had figured all this out?
Look, I'll tell you, if they had left me in charge of the navigation, we would have ended up at Uranus. So they do have a group of people. They have a group. Well, anyway, I have a terrible sense of direction.
She just referenced Uranus.
I know what she said.
Yeah, I just want to make that clear. Yeah, okay. but so this is like a 3-cushion pool shot off of 3 planets. Any more planets on the way out?
No. Then we went by Jupiter. And we went by Jupiter, incidentally, on the eve of the year 2001, which I thought was like so incredibly bitchin'.
Bitchin'.
Yeah.
I haven't done that since 1963.
Was the thing you sent a Camaro?
You were bitching. All right.
It's a surfer term.
So you slingshot Jupiter, and now you got enough energy to get to Saturn,
Yeah.
which is twice again as far away as Jupiter is.
Yeah, so it took
Yeah.
us another 3 years to do it. So it took us 7 years in total to cross the solar system.
All right, cool. And then it gets pulled into orbit, and you've got rings, you've got magnetic fields, you've got all manner of things going on there. You know what my favorite? I have 2 favorites. One, you found lightning on Saturn.
We did, yes, we captured lightning on Saturn.
And is it raining? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's doing essentially what lightning does here. It's accompanied by thunder and rain and so on. These are big convective storms that produce
Do you have rain on Saturn?
Yeah, we do.
Is it water or some other liquid?
This is in the water clouds, yeah.
The water cloud. But you have other clouds. And then if they rained, it wouldn't be rainwater. It'd be like rain ammonia or something. Is that
It
right?
could be rain ammonia. I guess that's too deep for us to know much about. We knew about the water clouds.
Okay. That'd be weird. Ammonia rain.
But think
there's
how clean your
methane- there's
countertops would be.
Clean. Everything would be clean.
They used to have rain like that in New York.
Disinfected.
All right, so we got that. And then what freaked me out to this day was this hexagon in Saturn's South Pole, was it?
North Pole.
A hexagon. No. There are no hexagons in the universe. What is that?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up because every time we released something about the hexagon on our website, cyclops.org, our hits went through the roof. Because I think people think this has something to do with crystal energy and what's a.
Yeah, a hexagon is a common crystal cross-sectional shape.
Yeah, but it's the straight sides in an atmosphere that really blew people away. So we've explained over and over and over again that this is just a continuous wave with just 6 waves in it. Jet stream that encircles Saturn. It's nothing more than that. It's very similar to what we have here on the Earth, except on the Earth it's very discontinuous because the system, the jet stream, is traveling over the oceans and hill and dale and so on, and friction just wears it down. But on Saturn, there is no friction, so it just is continuous.
So is it
What,
land?
Vanessa, what were you
Is
going
it
to
what?
say?
I was just, so it's, like in my mind, it's like I'm like picturing the shape that you learn about, like when you learn about octagon.
Hexagon is 6-sided.
So, right, I knew that. And then there's water? That's jet streams going between?
Well, it's a
like
jet stream of air on Saturn, and at that level, I don't know. It's probably hydrogen, mostly hydrogen, but it's just a jet stream. It's just very regular because there's nothing to disturb it. That's
And
really
it's at the bottom?
No, it's in the top of
Right.
the atmosphere. It's at the pole.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
So, Carolyn, I just want to comment that you're all calm and casual. Oh, it's just a hexagon, it's sustained waves. Don't tell me you didn't freak out when you first saw the hexagon.
Well, we first saw the hexagon with Voyager, and I was very freakable when I was young. But, by the time... Why was that funny?
Because if you get your freak on, it's like... So it's just easy in retrospect to say how to explain what you're looking at, but it seems to me that's a pretty impressive thing to discover on a planet. That's all. And you say, well, Earth has it too, it's just not a hexagon. But then we don't have it.
Well, okay, so that's why we went. You asked, why did we go? That's why we went. We want to discover all those things that are the same and are different about our planet, because ultimately we want to learn about process. And process, the more we learn about process, about planets, the better custodians of our own planet we can be. So that's what planetary exploration is all about.
So,
Aside from-
let's go.
Aside from having a really bitchin' time.
All right, so tell me about any questions you thought you would have answered but didn't get answered.
Oh, well, we still don't know exactly what the mass of Saturn's rings are, and it's important if you're interested in figuring out how old they are, where they came from, and that whole process. So, in fact, that's what the end of the Cassini mission is aiming to do eventually.
To measure the mass of Saturn's rings, because they're really skinny.
They're really skinny. They're only about 30 feet thick, yet they extend for 280,000 kilometers, which is about 1 light second. It would take light, the fastest thing we know, 1 second to travel across the rings. They would fit in nicely between the Earth and the Moon. And we've discovered so many things in there. Just let me know when we can start.
I have a question.
Yes, right.
Now, I'm going to explain this in layman's terms for the audience. Saturn's really big.
Really big.
Why are the rings so thin in comparison?
You really want to know the answer to this?
No, I just asked because I felt like I should say something.
But
Okay.
just to be clear, they are so thin, when Saturn is when they're edge onto us, they disappear entirely.
Well, not really.
Oh, snap.
Okay. All right. Let me try that again. They're so thin, they disappear.
How thin are they?
They disappear mostly.
Mostly.
Fine.
Mostly. But you wanted to know, okay, it's a real simple physics 101 explanation.
I didn't get that far.
They consist of lots and lots and lots of icy particles, chunks of ice that are like that tiny all the way to the size of small apartment buildings. And when they collide, which they did in the early days after they formed, and we think they formed by 2 satellites colliding with one another, something like that, this creates a cloud of debris, and these particles are in very wild and crazy orbits, and when they collide, they lose energy, but they conserve angular momentum. This is a process that even has produced the disks of galaxies that we know, the spiral galaxies, which are very thin also compared to their horizontal dimensions. So,
Does that mean that Earth will eventually have a ring of space junk and debris?
well, it could. If we left enough junk up there so that they collided, that actually would happen, yeah.
And isn't Saturn just like a mini solar system? I mean, in terms of the way our solar system formed, I mean, can't you make that analogous, the way the disks are?
Yes.
What's the moon count? If you want to analogize them to planets, what's the moon count for Saturn right now?
I've lost track. It's over 60.
Yeah, it's over 60.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
a
60
lot of
moons.
moons.
Wait,
That's a
you
lot.
don't know how many moons?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Not
Do
yet.
you know?
Allow me to defend this bit of ignorance.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we went through a little bit.
A girl can't know everything.
You reach a point where the number of something is not as important as what the thing actually is.
Good for you,
or is
Neil.
about.
That was brilliant.
And
Brilliant. That was brilliant.
wait.
Sounds like a cop-out to me.
So when people were taught that there were 9 planets in the solar system, and then Pluto got kicked out, people cried foul because they thought science was about the number. And they got jack to do with the number.
Wait, but didn't they just find a 9th planet anyway?
And is that why science has since stopped measuring things, Neil?
But hasn't Pluto been replaced?
No, we've only stopped counting.
It's just subcounting.
But hasn't Pluto been replaced by they detected a wobble that might mean there's another planet out there that we didn't know about?
Way out.
Way
very
out.
far.
In the Kuiper Belt.
In the
I just
Kuiper
find that so hard to understand that we could have had a planet in our own solar system that we haven't seen yet. Like
It's
how
way out.
Belt. Way out.
but we see exoplanets. I mean, we see, we can
It's
detect
dark
exoplanets.
out there.
Right. It's really different. I bet.
This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream, a subscription streaming service made for those of you who have no shame in your nerd game, with over 2,500 geek-umentaries and nonfiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month, and for our audience, the first 31 days are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/StarTalk and use promo code StarTalk. Make sure you check out Stephen Hawking's favorite places. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking takes a flight of epic proportions to visit his favorite places in the universe. A 3-part Curiosity Stream original series and an Emmy winner. Go to curiositystream.com/StarTalk for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. And for our listeners, enter promo code StarTalk when prompted during the sign-up process, and your membership is completely free for the first 31 days.
All right, so among the 60 plus moons, there are a couple of moons that rise up in their
Yes.
significance to those in search for life or interesting things going on moons. So what can you tell us about
Yeah,
that?
so these are the two best moons there are. Okay. The first one is Titan. It's about 50% larger than our own moon. It has a thick atmosphere of molecular nitrogen. It has a thermal structure that's like our own Earth here. And so in some sense, it's a mini Earth, except that it does not have oxygen in it, free oxygen in its atmosphere. And it has organic materials in its atmosphere. And those organic materials we suspected would be found on the surface in liquid form, and we didn't find them at first, and we didn't find them after a year or two, and then finally we found that they went to the poles. The liquids on Titan are liquid hydrocarbons that are ponded at the poles. And
That's a word, ponded?
Ponded?
That's cool. I like that
Someone
word.
where's their phone?
No, it's good. I like it. We made it a word here and now if it wasn't previously a word.
Okay, I think it was a word.
So liquid like methane.
Methane and ethane, yeah.
So these, like methane is the gas that comes out of your stove, typically if you live in a city. So that's flammable.
That's very
Can I ask
flammable.
a question about moons, just for the audience? I do know the answer
Yeah.
to this, but the difference between like a moon and a planet is that the moon orbits around.
Yes, and they're generally smaller. Generally smaller.
Okay.
Are there
Okay.
some moons that are bigger than the planets?
No, I don't really think so.
Right, I didn't either. It was only when you said generally that I got confused.
I was just covering my butt.
But a lot
No,
of
so
times-
Eugene, if the moon were bigger than the planet,
It would be the other way.
the planet would be the moon and the moon would be the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there
That's what
are-
I figured until she said generally.
But they're
And then
made-
I was like, I have
But
a
they're-
question now.
they're made of like the same kind of cool stuff, right?
Cool stuff, but not the same
Moons.
stuff.
Right. Oh, well, they're all different, but do moons have elements in common that, okay. Do moons all share certain elements that...
They're all made of cheese.
And by elements, I mean like
Stuff.
All right, let me help you out
yeah.
here. Okay.
help them out.
Yeah.
That was a nice passing of the book.
You're welcome.
So in the Saturn system, for example, the moons are largely made of water ice because it's so cold out there that water becomes, it's like a rock. You get to Uranus and then you get to Neptune, which are much farther out. You have moons that actually have methane on their surface, solid methane. So it just
Solid
depends.
methane.
Yeah. What's
So
wrong
you
with
cool
that?
the gas down, you liquefy it, cool it some more, then you get a solid, and that's laying around the moons of Uranus and Neptune.
Yeah, as also liquid nitrogen. I mean, most of our atmosphere, solid nitrogen, most of our atmosphere is molecular, gaseous nitrogen. But by the time you get to Neptune, we've got nitrogen on the surface. On Pluto, you heard a lot about nitrogen flowing on the surface of Pluto. Yeah.
Yeah, you used to hear about it.
But to Vanessa's point,
Hey, let's leave time to get to my favorite moon.
The best one.
Vanessa,
Yeah.
just to be clear,
Yes.
the fact that the moon is comprised of ingredients that are essentially identical to Earth's crust is one of the factors that led us to suggest that the moon was formed by a side swipe of a planetesimal in the early solar system, scattering countless tons of Earth's crust into a ring of debris around Earth that would later coalesce and form what today we call the moon.
Hallelujah.
But didn't they
Wow.
just study the moon rocks that they've got in 1969, and they just realized that the collision that created the moon was not a graze, it was actually something a lot more impactful. I just
This
read
guy
that.
reads up on everything, so if you're
Yeah,
not...
gotta watch out for him. Yeah, yeah. We gotta watch out. So the question is, how deep did it actually graze?
Exactly.
And it could not have gone too deep, because if you get too deep in Earth, on Earth, when Earth was molten in its early days, the heavy stuff fell to the middle, the lighter stuff floated to the top. So nearly all of Earth's iron and platinum and iridium and gold is in our core. And if you sideswiped enough to reach the core, you would scatter the heavy elements into what would become the moon, and the moon would have an appreciable amount of heavy elements, and it doesn't. It just doesn't. For something that size, it should have a whole iron core, and it's got nothing. No.
So I shouldn't go to the moon to get any platinum.
Correct.
Well, now I need a new thing to do in February.
So I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
That's a completely sensible question, and that question, when applied to the Earth-Moon system, led to an entire new understanding of the formation of the moon. Just.
Oh. Well, I guess it was
So which planet is a candidate to have sideswiped us?
What's that?
Which planet is a candidate to have
We think it may have been
sideswiped us?
completely destroyed.
Oh, just it's gone. Is
Yeah.
that what the asteroid belt is now or something?
Asteroid belt, yeah, it's got a lot of debris, but if you add it all up, it doesn't come to much.
Okay,
It comes to about like 5% of the mass of the moon.
right.
Yeah.
It's very,
Kind of
it
like
wouldn't have
us.
had to be a planet-sized thing, and it's likely that the projectile broke up and is now part of the moon.
Could
Can
be,
I
yeah.
offer an alternate hypothesis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Space ray,
Space ray.
laser gun,
Gamma ray.
gamma ray,
Yeah.
laser gun.
It could have been.
What
that
level
too.
thetan are you? I can't remember.
Level 3.
Can't divulge it.
All right, so we had Titan, but if we're going to look for life, which inspires so much of our invested emotion and energy in space exploration, Titan doesn't sound like the place we would find life as we know it.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to find life
right.
as we know.
The
it.
it wouldn't look like a goat, or it would be like super not a goat.
Yeah, not a goat, right? So,
Like
and you're asking him about his
big one.
cretinism? Is that what you were asking?
Earlier, but we moved on.
So, what else is tantalizing with regard to life?
So to me, the most provocative and most thrilling result we found is that this little moon called Enceladus, which is no bigger across than England, I mean, it's very small, has geysers shooting out that extend hundreds of miles above the surface. In fact, if you follow some of them, they go tens of thousands of kilometers away from Enceladus, and they form the E-ring. But these geysers, we now know after being there
Well, just a sec. Saturn's rings have been lettered,
yes,
one of which is called the E-ring.
one of which is called the
Okay,
E-ring.
gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. I think the
And-
Pentagon has an E-ring. I think, doesn't it?
Oh, does it?
I don't know, D-ring?
I've got a phone that has the ring.
How many rings does Saturn have?
Don't ask those questions. Let me finish one thought at a time. I can
All right.
only handle one thought at a
So
time.
tell me about Enceladus. Go.
We
So
don't, we don't count things anymore, right, Eugene?
We don't let
Thank
them
you.
either.
Wanted one last counting.
So E-ring, Enceladus. Go.
Enceladus. So these geysers, we know, come through 4 major fractures at the South Pole, which is a really unique, interesting
Well,
terrain.
these are fractures in the ice.
In the ice,
Yes.
in the ice shell, sorry. There's an ice shell that lies on top of a global ocean of salty liquid water that is suffused with organic materials. And we know that because after being there a while, we figured all this out, and then later on in the mission, we actually send the spacecraft through the plume to pick up material and analyze its composition. So, like, we got this down pat now.
Do you have
We
that
really-
much remote control over what next orbit your spacecraft took?
You know how you operate drones?
Yeah.
No, never mind.
Wait, so when you say organic
Some of them-
material, what do you mean? Like, what constitutes organic
Kale?
Well,
material?
it's-
Kale. Good.
Did you say cake?
No, kale.
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 Did we find space kale?
Well, close to it, close enough. But simple stuff like, compounds that contain carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and things like that.
Tofu.
Those are the basic, what?
I'm kidding, sorry.
The basic bioelements that you and I are made out of.
Yeah.
Plus a lot more, but especially you. But
Yeah.
that was he's laughing.
But, okay, so Carolyn, I'm less impressed
Oh.
that there are organic materials there, because you just listed some of the most common kinds of atoms in the universe. The question is Enceladus in a kind of state where we can think of it containing life as we know it?
Yes, because it has an ocean, and
Why is it? It's outside the Goldilocks zone. Why does it
has a
have?
subsurface ocean. Okay, I see where you're going with this. It has a subsurface ocean, and we found through whatever it's been now, nearly 60 years of exploring planets, both from ground-based observations using telescopes and our spacecraft, that there are several moons in our solar system that have subsurface oceans. And so they're
Liquid oceans?
Liquid water.
Something had to be melting them, and it's not the sun.
Isn't
No, it's
every
not.
ocean a subsurface?
Not the Pacific.
But isn't it sub?
No, sub means it's under the ground. Think of it that way. Except the ground on Enceladus is ice.
I see what you're
I
saying.
got it. Wait.
The top of it
The
starts
surface,
under
it's on the surface
okay.
of the body.
Because I was like, well, what do you
Wow,
think
I'm
an
doing a really
ocean
bad
is?
job.
It's like when you have a chocolate cake, the frosting is on top, the cake is sub-cake.
It is.
And then sometimes there's a layer of frosting that is subcake.
Do we have that? Do we have frosting?
Wait, and just to be clear,
I see.
But Vanessa, until recently, the North Pole Ocean is an ocean under a layer of ice. So your question was not out of nowhere. I mean, you can have oceans on Earth under layers of ice.
Yeah.
Used to be able to.
Used to be able to, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a dumb question? You
Yes.
referred to the South Pole. How do we gauge north and south on a moon in space?
The way it's spinning.
That
We
doesn't
know
answer my
how. What?
I got you. Ready?
Uh-huh.
Hold out your right hand. Okay? Like this. Curl your fingers. If your fingers curl in the direction of the rotating object, your thumb points to the North Pole.
So if it's spinning like this, and we know that these moons are spinning, we've been there a long time, we got that down. If it's spinning like this, then that's what he means, the North Pole.
Wait, but Venus rotates the other way, so what would the north be reversed on Venus?
Right, so if anything that seems to rotate this way, you take your hand, do that, and then the North Pole would be down.
Okay, so Venus's north pole is south of everyone else's pole, north pole in the solar system? Because doesn't it
It's
rotate?
called the right-hand rule to establish what is north.
Sure.
Yeah,
I got that.
yeah. So go on.
Okay, let me finish
Well, it's
this.
a great question. Great question. What
Let
is
me
north?
finish
Thanks.
the story. So
That's why we can all agree what is north, no matter what object we're looking at.
Well, that guy doesn't agree over there.
All right. So where were you? Go.
So liquid water, organic compounds that we know come from the ocean, and it's being heated by tidal flexure. Okay, so it's in a resonance, which makes its orbit eccentric. Sometimes it's far away from Saturn, sometimes it's close, and that means that the tidal forcing varies, and that's how you get tidal energy injected into one of these bodies. There's enough of it to keep the ocean stable. And so this is what NASA has been saying for decades now would be the formal requirements that we would want to know existed on a body so that we'd mount the next kind of wave of exploration and go there particularly to look for life. And so that's where we are with Enceladus.
So the Goldilocks zone that is so celebrated can exist in other ways outside of the traditional Goldilocks zone.
There really is no Goldilocks zone as it pertains to distance from the sun. But there is a Goldilocks zone in the sense that, well, there is none. No, it just, because all you need is something that...
A source of heat.
well,
Whether or not it's the sun.
Yeah, but you ultimately need something like tidal energy.
How
Because-
warm
So you need
are
liquid.
the oceans?
What?
How warm are those oceans?
Well, we don't really know, but they have to be at least, the temperature of liquid water, like 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees
And they
Fahrenheit.
gotta pack some punch if you're blowing geysers 100 kilometers in the sky.
That's not hard to understand because the weight of the overlying ice shell forces the water up the cracks. And then there's also volatile materials like we've seen
In
ammonia.
Japan, they have special toilets that do that also.
Do we want to go there?
They're dangerous, those things,
Are
right?
you serious? Are you
I
serious?
have a question about, okay, so if you're looking for life on that moon, has anyone ever thought, maybe this is very irresponsible, but has anyone ever thought like, well, what if we just threw a bunch of bugs in there?
Why
that-
did you want to do that?
Well, just to see if they could like live and
But
then you could create like a
This is not an
new...
aquarium. I mean, we're not.
But I know, but wouldn't it be so cool and then come back 5 years later and they've all grown up and... like,
Neil, help
does
me
that...
out.
Yeah.
Is that a thing that...
Could we put, this is just an idea, we put enough trout that when we get there again, we can fish. Is that really so bad?
Okay, so NASA has an entire office called Planetary Protection.
Yeah, they do.
And their goal is to preserve planets, this would include moons, that may have life from contamination of life from Earth, and to preserve life on Earth from any bugs that might accidentally be brought back from our planetary mission.
It's called forward and backwards contamination.
Forward and backwards
I don't
contamination.
know that those planets have that with us. So why are we like taking such good care of them?
They don't have an agreement, a
Yeah, like
treaty.
they never said to us, like,
Right.
we'll do this for, you know what I mean? It feels sort of one-sided.
So until we know that a planet is completely sterile, we want to be really careful.
This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Make sure you check out Stephen Hawking's favorite places. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking takes a flight of epic proportions to visit his favorite places in the universe. A 3-part CuriosityStream original series and an Emmy winner. Go to curiositystream.com/StarTalk for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. And for our listeners, enter promo code StarTalk when prompted during the sign-up process, and your membership is completely free for the first 31 days.
So you were also part of the Voyager team, which had messages for aliens that might find this spacecraft.
How
which has
old are you?
It has escaped our solar system. And so this movement to try to contact extraterrestrial life, be it microbial or what we might call intelligent, it's been going on for a while. But some people might ask, since that the Voyager record contained data that would allow aliens to triangulate back to find out what planet in the galaxy this was launched from.
Yes.
This is basically our return address.
Right.
Do you give strangers your email address? Other humans that have DNA in common with you?
If they're in space.
Actually, I
It's
do.
space, apparently.
Actually, I do.
You do?
I do. It's on my website, cyclops.org.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, Vanessa, do you?
No.
I'm just saying. I'm curious about it's not the ethics of it, but the sensibility of alerting and we all know what aliens will do when they find humans. We've seen this many times played out in the movies.
So this is
Didn't you tell this to Carl Sagan at the time that he put and he and Ann Julian put the record on the spaceship?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No, I did not.
Everyone was very hopeful that aliens will be peaceful
Everyone
creatures.
thought it was, well, it's on a spacecraft that, is fast to us, but it's going pretty slow. It's not going to get too far, I mean, it's, But we have been, there are people, myself included, who wanted to send messages into the galaxy encoded on transmissions coming from the most powerful radio dishes we have here on the Earth. The Arecibo telescope is one. Frank Drake, famous astronomer, radio astronomer, started this in 1974. He relayed a message to M31, is a globular cluster in our galaxy. Actually, it was a demonstration of the power of the transmitter on that telescope, which they had just brought online, and he and his creativity and his just exuberance and wondering about life elsewhere constructed this message that was encoded on the signals, and they sent it into space. Very celebrated thing. And I wanted to do it again, except do it better. And there's even a website where I describe this. But suddenly there is afoot this movement of people who think that this is a terribly dangerous thing to do.
It includes Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
It does.
It includes, who else? Elon Musk.
Yes, and they think that we are endangering the planet to let aliens know where we are.
We endanger ourselves when one civilization encounters another in the history of life on Earth.
Right, so the extrapolation is, so a much more powerful advanced civilization encounters us, it's going to be like humans encountering flies, and they'll just want to like squish us and
Can I say what
We're
my
already doing it. That's my argument. That's the counter-argument.
What is the counter-argument? I have yet to hear a counter-argument.
And the counter-argument is not due to me. People have been saying this for a long time now. But the idea is that any civilization that is advanced enough to come knocking on our doorstep has already filtered out. I mean, if it got that far, it has to be benign, because if it wasn't benign, it would have destroyed itself. So,
Yeah. Can I say what my
Alien lover!
Can I say what my feeling is?
Yeah, Sean, what?
I just feel like even if this advanced civilization is so much more advanced that we're like ants relative to these aliens, then whatever they want, even if it is enslaving me, I kind of feel like that would be the right thing to do anyway.
Wow.
Because I mean, if they're so smart, if they think that I should be basically the coffee boy or something, then
this is a guy who has
I'll
no
do
trouble
that.
with authority figures.
Well, no,
Wow.
because they
So
know
so-
everything, so they must know what's right for us then. And it might be squashing us like bugs. Who
Can I
knows?
just clarify? You're making a pro-slavery argument?
Yes, he is!
As long as
I don't know
it's
if I
an
wanna be
advanced enough
quoted as saying
civilization that I believe you think needs coffee, is that the,
I mean, I've
that
heard
you would
that.
get them coffee? They would come here.
How do you think they stay awake on those long interstellar flights? It's definitely Starbucks.
Yeah.
Wait. So you were saying that a sufficiently intelligent alien species that made it here must, number one, be benign. Otherwise, with that technology and power, if they were evil, they'd be evil to each other and
they
destroy one another, as we were on the brink of a few decades ago, possibly even
Now.
decades to come. And so, fine. And now you're going to say they're so smart. They have our best interest in mind.
Well, they'll know what's right better than we'll know what's right. That's
I think
that's
so
what I'm
too.
saying.
I think that they'll be so evolved, literally evolved, and they will appreciate life because they will have studied. They probably know already what's going on in Enceladus.
Vanessa,
What I was going to ask is, what have we said to them? And doesn't it also matter, like, what we say? Like, if we're like, oh, everyone's nice here, you guys should stop by. Or if we're like,
no, it's usually our coordinates, like where we are. We're built on DNA.
I mean,
this is what we look like.
Is it ever like a paella recipe or anything? That like they could try this thing and be like, this is fun. I wonder if they have more of that. And they come and they all want paella.
Wait. Plus,
How do you-
if they show up and there's some appendage sticking out, maybe that's not what you should shake. Because you don't know alien anatomy,
Right.
for example.
I'd love to pull on an alien penis. As a sign of friendship.
How did we give them our coordinates and stuff? Do we just think that they know our?
Well,
like,
you have to make certain assumptions. It's actually in all seriousness, this is a very interesting, fascinating intellectual exercise to go through to figure out how you would communicate with an alien organism. You have to assume
They're not going to speak English.
they're not going to speak
But
English.
they would know some French.
They'll know.
I would freak out if an alien landed in my backyard and said, "Parlez-vous français?" I would just,
Okay,
I'd
that
be
won't happen.
drooling in the corner.
It won't happen.
Telepathic, but only
Some
in
people
French.
think Gerard Depardieu was an angel from another world. So
So you'd have to assume that they know the geography of the galaxy and that they know about electromagnetic radiation and all its properties, and they know physics and maybe they have math too, or something like it, because they got here. I mean, they had to get here from,
Yeah.
thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of light years.
Light years away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't just fold space on a lucky guess. They probably...
I wonder if they know about wormholes, like the whole contact.
Yeah,
thing,
why wouldn't
wormholes.
they? I'll give them wormholes. I want wormholes. So if they know what's best for you, ask for a wormhole. Tell them that you want a wormhole.
I'll let him know.
Because I think you're next to make contact there. So I'm going to come to you.
I actually left my cell phone upstairs, so it's going to be a while.
All right, so Carolyn, you are hopeful, and I'm delighted to hear that. You're more hopeful than I am, because there's look at how tribal we are, human to human, and somehow you're thinking we wouldn't be human tribal against aliens or vice versa.
But there's no guarantee that we're going to make it. We may be one of these failed civilizations if we don't get our act together. We haven't, right? We haven't passed the test yet. So we may just go by way of all those civilizations that just destroyed themselves, and we're not going to get to participate in the nirvana that awaits all the peaceful.
Well, hopefully that'll be a future generation.
What gets me is there are all these outer space treaties that the UN comes up with, and peaceful use of outer space, and friendship in outer space. And I'm thinking, I have very little confidence in that, because why would you think that on Earth we like killing each other, but in space, that's a place to be friends?
You don't think ISIS would be super nice on the moon?
I'm just saying, I am not convinced. I'm not convinced that we will treat each other better in space than we do on Earth until we know how to treat each other better on Earth. All right, it's time to wrap up all this talk about death and AI. When we come back, we're going to take your questions on everything cosmic about the future of the human race on Earth or in space on Startalk. All right, let's go straight on in. If you come from someplace other than New York, I would welcome to know your point of origin. Sir, go ahead. What's your question?
I come from 10 blocks away, so it's...
10 blocks away.
Okay.
What country is that? Is that right?
Exactly. So my question's, Elon Musk has been doing a lot of stuff in SpaceX on launching stuff into space, but it seems like his underlying motive is really to colonize Mars to some extent. And just wanted to get kind of, I guess, everybody's opinion about colonizing
You'll only get one,
Mars.
because otherwise we'd be here all night. Oh, go ahead.
Very good. Well, that was what it
I
was.
assume you want mine.
Yes.
And I'm all for it.
So specifically, you want a comment on...
On Elon Musk's plan to colonize Mars with SpaceX.
Sean, what do you feel about colonizing Mars?
My understanding was that Elon wanted to get to Mars himself. I don't think he cares that much about the rest of us coming along. But
you know why? Because I think he said he'd rather die on Mars than live on Earth.
That's what he said. I repeat, I think it's obviously something that we should do is to send people to Mars because we want to study it. But I don't think we should consider that any savior for the human race. Because again, look at Arizona. I mean, look at the Sahara. It's like if we can't grow trees in the Sahara, then we're not going to be able to do much on Mars.
There you go. Thank you. Next question. And where are you from?
My name is Carla. I'm from an unfascinating place also called New York.
Okay, right.
And my question is more on the social side. You guys mentioned about Carl Sagan making a marketing move as far as taking images in outer space and all that. What do you think is going to take for the 21st century, the quote-unquote millennial kind of generation, to get interested in space and actually propel the next generation towards space exploration?
Alien
Caroline,
invasion.
is there
Alien
something
invasion.
working on that generation now, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there's a next generation coming up,
Yes.
the millennials and those who follow them. We had our sort of pale blue dot and our moon launch and our forces of science and technology to inspire us. Do you see anything on the horizon? Is that an okay paraphrase of your question? Yes, good, thank you. Yeah, is there anything on the horizon that you see?
Memes.
Well,
Memes, that's right.
I think,
Internet cats, yes. This is what you guys have created for yourself. Yeah. Carolyn, any reflections there?
I think the biggest thing that's going on in the planetary science community now and also at NASA is this idea that we're going to go and find life in the solar system. And so it's going to take work to do that because it's actually a pretty hard question and we got to figure out what the best way is to do it. But it's not going to happen. I'm going to be gone, but probably before that great big discovery happens. And we're going to need young people who are young now to kind of, carry the torch. So
People
and
today who were as young as you were when you joined Voyager.
Right. So it's going to happen at some point. I mean, there's really good reason to think we actually might find life in our solar system. We just gotta mount the get going on it.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Zach from the smellier side of the river, New Jersey.
Across the moat. Yes.
Exactly. Kind of bouncing off of what you said about life within our solar system, I think everyone here is in agreement that there's life in the universe, and that's kind of where I'm going at in the universe as a whole. Coming from a non-religious man, I am Jewish, but hold on, stay with me. It's okay. But religion as a whole.
Oh wait, I can't hear him.
It's a good one, Eugene. But the universe in general, I was wondering what you guys think, because I know when you put your head on the pillow at night, you think of what is the universe and what is the functionality of it? Is there a greater cause? Is it meant for a purpose? Is it built for something? I just,
In 3 minutes.
I'd love to know what you guys think, simply, as fast as you could, what you think the universe is.
Okay,
as a
Vanessa,
function.
this is for you.
Oh my God.
Verse to you, I guess, is the.
I do think that there has to be life on so many different parts of the universe, and so that everyone's coexisting. But I don't see why we can't just go to another planet, throw a couple things out, see what comes back. But I do think it's to have all these different species coexist.
Do you, Neil, think that that we might be more likely in a matrix than in a real universe? Do you ascribe to that philosophy?
I remain convinced that if we figure out a way to make a perfect computer simulation of a world or of a universe, and in that simulation there is what we would call life, and that life has free will as programmed in, that they could then decide that they want to make a simulation of a universe themselves. And if each one of these simulations reaches a point where it makes a simulation of the universe, then most universes that will exist will be simulations. And if that is the case, then the likelihood that we now are in a simulation compared with being the first actual universe that created the life that made the simulations is very high. So
why are there no dragons then?
I would be deeply intrigued. I'm intrigued by that possibility, that we are the playthings of a higher intelligence, and every now and then they get bored, so they throw in, they stir the pot a little. And they say, okay, Donald Trump say this today instead of something else. And everything is a frenzy. And then they're watching this and they're entertained by it all. Beacon Theater, thank you for your time. Thank you for my panel. Vanessa, Carolyn, Sean, Michael.
This episode of Startalk is brought to you by CuriosityStream.
We're back on Startalk live at Beacon Theater! We are talking about space exploration, the search for aliens. Is that a good thing? Maybe, maybe not. And what impact should that have on our culture, on our civilization? And we've got a panel of fun folks to help us decode these questions. I've got a friend and colleague, Carolyn Porco, head of the imaging team of Cassini Mission to Saturn. Carolyn Porco, yes. I call her Madam Saturn. And you okay with that? I never asked.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It could be worse.
Okay, all right. We've also got Sean Ono Lennon, who's an artist and musician. He's going to give us that side of this story. And Eugene, tell us who you brought.
Michael Ian Black and Vanessa Bayer.
All right. So, Carolyn, some of the images that you were in charge of bringing back or assembling, creating, because the field of view of the camera is not so large that you get everything. You have to mosaic many of the big pictures, sweeping pictures that we've seen. At the end of the day, we're looking at shadows of the ring cast on the ball. The sun is here, and you see how many tiny rings make up the big ring. And I'm looking at it and say, I want this as a poster on my wall.
I know.
And so, Sean, do you see the space pictures as art?
I certainly do. In fact, even when I was very young, I actually gave Carolyn this painting because we became friends recently, and I painted Saturn. And I remember realizing later on that the coloring of Saturn was artificially colored, and I was so depressed. I was like, well, what does Saturn really look like? And that's what's so cool about Carolyn's work, is that she's actually showing us more, beautiful images of what Saturn really would look like to our eyes. But I was always kind of surprised that they color them, and I know it's for science and stuff.
He's talking about false color pictures.
Yeah, you know how it looks so colorful, Saturn. But actually, I realized that Carolyn's pictures are much more accurate. So yeah, I follow it for sure.
So Carolyn, if you go back into the early '60s, space missions, no one really, the scientific community, didn't really want to send cameras.
No,
because a picture is actually fine, but there's no real data in a picture. You want chart recorders and measure magnetic fields and spectral distributions. And so how did photography of cosmic objects rise to such a height?
Well, this is a very interesting little tidbit of planetary science history, but in the early days of the space program, Neil is right. They didn't want to send cameras, and it was Carl Sagan who was arguing for...
He argued 1 billion times. Yes.
Billions of it. He argued for bringing along cameras on planetary missions when all the other scientists thought pictures were for PR. They weren't basic science, and they would just be taking up space on a spacecraft. But he lost...
Not only space, but weight. The weight of a camera.
The whole thing. Money, budget.
Everything. Money, budget, everything.
So the first, I think I've got this right, the first planetary mission didn't have a camera, but he eventually won the war, and we've had cameras on spacecraft ever since. But,
How did they get that reverse shot of the moon craft taking off from the moon? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? In 1969, when they actually land on the moon. I mean, there's this reverse shot where the moon lander goes back up off the moon. I mean, was there a cameraman sitting there?
No, there was a camera that was left on the lunar module that was left on and took a...
That's a pretty spectacular shot.
There was the cameraman.
It was just a dude sitting there. I just was always amazed that they got a shot of them leaving, because
I think what ultimately happened, NASA is formed as an agency first to compete with Russia, the Soviet Union, and to show our technological might. And you're right, the public relations wasn't so much about what you do with the science. It was about, here's our astronauts. The public relations was all through that lens. And so later on, you would learn that when you take those kinds of pictures, people eat it up, and it transports them into that moment. And then NASA's budget becomes a little more stable, and people, no matter who they are, have some sensitivity and interest in continuing this adventure.
That's right.
But it looks like Hubble and your mission did this like nothing else ever did.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you noticed. But
what'd you say?
It's not worth repeating.
I was on the Voyager mission, and believe me, the Voyager was just absolutely the most magnificent, romantic mission you could ever have been on.
And you were young back then.
I was young. There was a time when I was young. Okay. And I noticed, as great as it was, I was noticing that, the pictures were being processed basically to support press conferences. So most of the pictures that were released to the public by the Voyager mission were put out in, a period of about 7 days around each of the flybys. And there wasn't a lot of attention paid.
Just to be clear, Voyager visited many planets.
Jupiter,
and it would not
Saturn.
go into orbit around them. So hence the word flyby had very high currency back then, because you never hung out at the planet that you visited.
That's
so
right.
you'd fly by Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and each of those had this package. That's what you're describing.
That's right.
Okay.
So, and there wasn't a whole lot of attention paid to how you process the images or getting the color right. And so when I was made the leader of the imaging team on Cassini, this was like one of my cardinal goals. It's not like I could tell my fellow scientists this, but I had it in my mind that I was going to make the pictures absolutely as beautiful and as natural as I could, so the public would feel like they were along for the ride. So, and that's what we did, and I'm, really proud.
One of the great.
You're welcome. Who is that?
Michael, what do you got?
Where are the Voyager spacecraft now?
They're about, don't quote me on this, but something like 16 to 17 or 18 light hours away from here.
Are they out of the solar system?
One of them, Voyager 1, has crossed kind of the edge of the magnetic bubble, so to speak. So we can legitimately say it's in interstellar space. But you can't legitimately say it's no longer under the influence of the sun, because it's got to go really, really far.
Is that the heliopause, the edge of the magnetic field of the
What?
sun? Isn't it called the heliopause, the edge of the magnetic field of the sun?
Yes, it is. So it went past the heliopause, and they know from the character of the charged particles and the rate that they're impacting.
And the direction they hit it.
And the direction and all that, that it finally got to the interstellar medium.
Interstellar.
And I thought that just sent chills up.
And long before it got there, it passed Neptune, the
Voyager 2.
No, I'm talking about for the pale blue dot.
Oh, yeah.
So Voyager 1, the two Voyagers. So Voyager 1 passed Neptune.
Past the orbit of Neptune.
The orbit of Neptune, the last planet in the solar system, and
you will leave it alone.
He's right.
And they turned the camera around.
Yes.
By whose prompting? Tell me about that story.
Okay. So this was just an idea that I had as soon as I was made a team member of the Voyager imaging team, which was right after I got my PhD. So this was like in October of 1983, I went to work for Brad Smith, who was the head of the imaging team.
So you got your PhD, if I remember correctly, from Caltech.
Caltech in May of 1983.
Good school.
So, anyway.
Thank you, Eugene, for establishing that Caltech is a good school.
Somebody's gotta
go. So I just thought it would be great to take a picture. Actually, my idea was to take a picture of the solar system, because I knew Voyager 1 was not going to encounter any more planets after Saturn. And I had a different idea than Carl, who eventually had also proposed this, but I didn't know about his effort, he didn't know about mine. I thought, wouldn't it be great to show what the solar system would look like to an alien coming in from outside? That's what I wanted to do. Carl, of course...
A family photo of planets.
Yes, and Carl wanted to take a picture of the solar system too, but he really was after that whole, romantic idea of showing the Earth as... He hadn't coined the phrase yet, pale blue dot, but that was his idea. And to show the picture of the Earth awash in a sea of stars, just to emphasize the loneliness, the tininess of our planet in the hopes of engendering feelings of planetary brotherhood and so on. So I was going around hawking it on the Voyager project in like 1984. Annie tells me, his wife tells me, he had started 2 years earlier, Andrian. We both got like dull stares, like, you want to do what? You want to take a picture of the Earth? It's only going to be a pixel. What are you, crazy? Get out of here. That kind of a response. And finally, as the mission, we're really getting near the end.
They slapped you?
No.
Okay.
That's just my audio-visual effect.
Okay.
So finally, Carl, now when I say they didn't want to do it, the Voyager project didn't want to do it, the big guys, the ones who made the decisions, Carl went to NASA. He went all the way to the NASA administrator and convinced him.
The head of NASA.
The head of NASA. And so the people at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory were directed to take this picture, and that's what we did.
Why is it so hard? Isn't there a lot of downtime? I mean, you're just flying through space. Can't you just say, just turn the camera around for a second? Why is that so hard?
I think it required doing something that we hadn't done on the Voyager project, and that was take the antenna, which was continuously in those days pointing to the Earth, and actually break communications, take it off, so we could use the antenna to shield the camera from the sun, or else you wouldn't be able to take this picture. And then take the antenna and point it back to the Earth, and they were afraid they'd never get it back there. So it wasn't until Voyager 1 was completely done with its mission, its planetary part of the mission, that they let us do this. And they managed to regain communications anyway, but we finally
this
did
became
it.
the famous pale blue dot,
Famous pale blue dot
image that became it became almost the spiritual inspiration for the book, Carl Sagan's book, The Pale Blue Dot.
It's iconic. I mean,
Yeah.
it just really, people really love it. It's
So
amazing.
it's just Earth, just barely a pixel in the image, and it was not in a sea of stars, but it's a sea of nothingness. And
But that's just because of the aperture of a lens. If you set it for the lighting of the Earth, then you're not going to see the stars. But they're there. It's not like they weren't there.
oh yeah, of course, there
they're
are
there.
stars there.
It was.
Correct. Thank you.
He's trying to keep us honest.
Keep it honest. Right. Your exposure matters here, and you
I call
blow out the
bullshit.
Earth.
I don't think there were stars there.
So, all right. So, in The Pale Blue Dot, the book, Carl Sagan waxed poetic and philosophical with great elegance on what our place is in space and in the universe in general upon reflecting on this pale blue dot. But you were not happy with the pale blue dot, were you? You decided to take another pale blue dot.
I did. Okay. I did.
So what did you do?
So, okay, so I had always, since the first one, had it in my, well, since I became the leader of the imaging team, I had it in my mind to do that picture over again, only make it better. And, well, because, you know, in a proposal that Carl wrote to the project, the Voyager project, to request that they take this picture, he wrote, this is not commonly known, but he wrote that the idea was to take a picture of the Earth, and I quote, awash in a sea of stars. And as Neil said, that picture didn't capture stars, and the Earth is sitting on a beam of scattered light. And of course, none of this matters because Carl, you know, he was the master of romancing things and turning the whole thing into the allegory on the human condition. So everybody.
His prose was bigger than the image itself.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It just gave him the opportunity to point out, you know, our cosmic circumstance. So I wanted to take the picture that probably Carl would have wanted. And as I was looking through the timeline of events that my colleagues were planning and I were planning for the science that we were going to collect with Cassini, and I found an opportunity that wouldn't get anybody too angry. You know, I'm not taking too much time, too much resources to take this mosaic with the Earth in it. It occurred to me, wow, you know, why, instead of doing what everybody seems to have done since the original pale blue dot, and take the picture of the Earth and then 2 weeks later tell everybody, hey, while you weren't looking, we took your picture and isn't it beautiful? Here it is. I thought, why don't we tell the people of the world ahead of time that on such and such a date, at such and such a time, your picture is going to be taken, and go out as the window of opportunity opens and look up and think about your position on this planet in the never-ending blackness of space and how unique our planet is and its
You told me
lush
you got
life.
people to step outside of their house and look up at Saturn while you took their picture.
I did.
It was the original Pokemon Go.
No, it turned out to be,
You had a cute name for it. What was it called?
it's called The Day the Earth Smiled.
The Day the Earth Smiled.
Because I asked everybody to go out and smile. You know, smile in celebration of being alive on a pale blue dot. It was like the biggest cosmic performance art ever.
So is that art? I mean, you're an artist.
Kind of, yeah.
And we have, but we have a scientist here talking about beautiful pictures and engaging people, and this is not how scientists usually talk, but it's how artists live for that.
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, the intersection of science and art and math and art, I mean, I think a lot of musicians think of music, for instance, as a kind of audio geometry. You know, I mean, you can easily graph pitch and time and volume, you know, on a graph. It's chartable, and so in a way, you know, melody and music could be considered a kind of audio mathematical language. There's actually this quote that I wanted to tell you. I don't know if you've heard it. It's kind of beautiful.
Wait. That was way deeper than the time it took you to communicate that.
Sorry.
That was just, we have to pause on that.
Well,
so,
you know.
so music is an audio geometry.
Well, yeah, there's this quote that's relevant to this. It's not, I wasn't on a tangent here, but yeah, you know this guy James Joseph Sylvester, who was the tutor for Florence Nightingale, who invented nursing or modern nursing. Anyway, yeah, he's a good guy, or she's an amazing woman. But he has this quote that's music is the mathematics of sense, and mathematics is the music of reason, which I think is beautiful.
Ooh,
right?
Very nice.
We're both going.
What? Like, that's what? Yeah, yeah. And Puff Daddy is the Jupiter of. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so I do think that. I mean, in fact, most of my mathematically and scientifically minded friends, I mean, professional scientists, tend to be really big art fans too. So there's definitely an intersection personality-wise. But one of the things I was thinking about, leading up to this show was science and art actually the same kind of thing, in Babylonian, Sumerian, and Egyptian times? I mean, what I mean by that was there art for art's sake, or did it always have a function? I mean, hieroglyphs were telling stories and mythologies, and, being an architect to make a pyramid, you were a scientist, and astronomy and astrology were kind of the same thing because it was all part of religion. And I guess what I'm saying is I think science and art were, by definition, intersected until a period later on when they started to be totally separate. Because I feel like now art, what defines art from science or anything else is that art doesn't have a function. It doesn't have a purpose other than to be art. So art for art's sake. I mean, that's why it's not math or science. But I feel like, in Da Vinci's time, for instance, I mean, this is more like a question. Da Vinci was a scientist and an artist. Did he really feel there was a huge separation between those things? I don't know.
Based on the notebooks of his that I've looked at, it's all the same.
Exactly. I mean, he's sketching horses and studying the muscular, patterns and the skin. Yeah, exactly.
And in fact, I think we have some residue of that time in some of our modern referencing. So, for example, today you would say, she's got it down to a science. And on the other, you'd say, you raised it to an art.
Raised it to an art form, right.
Science and art show up in those two phrases, and in each of those cases, we kind of mean the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That somebody has taken a craft to an extreme limit of perfection, and the only way you can reference that is to say they've raised it to an art or got it down to a science. I want to bring this back to what started it. Carolyn did The Day the Earth Smiled, and everyone got engaged in an activity that was symbolic, and people were touched by the science. And I've seen lyrics that you've written and co-written that were touched by science. And so you're not just an observer of what's going on, it has infused who and what you are as an artist. And I'm enchanted every time I learn that such a thing happens. You've got I got you, what you got?
Yeah, I have a song.
You've got a song here called Nebulullaby.
Yeah, well, I have a band with my girlfriend called The Ghost of a Saber-Toothed Tiger. It's a catchy title. And we have a bunch of songs. I mean, we're both kind of science groupies. And I say we're science groupies because if I were to say I was a science nerd, that would mean I'd actually have to know facts. But as a groupie, I'm just kind of waiting backstage and waiting to be touched by science, as it were. But yeah, I don't mean you specifically, Neil, but but I'm open to it.
What's the title of your album?
It's Monolith of Phobos. That's my
Monolith of Phobos.
Yeah, that's
Phobos, one of Mars's moons.
Well, the origin of that record title, which is the most recent record I put out with a band called The Delirium, is, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a C-SPAN interview with Buzz Aldrin where he says, "There's a monolith on Phobos, and I don't know who put it there. Maybe God put it there, but we have to go boldly forth." And he kind of gets really excited, and I thought it was...
He has a T-shirt that says, "Get your ass to Mars."
Exactly.
Right.
He's really into it. But I just thought it was the most amazing interview I'd ever seen. I mean, I assumed it was going to be front page news of every newspaper, but no one seems to have seen this. Have you guys seen that? Okay, because it's pretty unbelievable. I mean, it's the second man who has landed on the moon telling us that there's structure on Phobos. I mean, look, I know he's not saying it's artificial,
Does
but
he know
still.
about the hexagon on Saturn?
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
I can't wait to tell him.
Okay, but the point is you're inspired by the science that's unfolding around you.
Yeah, we have a song called Schrodinger's Cat, which
Or
refers
do
to, you know...
Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, exactly.
So Schrodinger was a physicist, fundamental to the birth of quantum physics as a branch of physics.
Right, but didn't he come up with the Schrodinger's cat scenario to disprove the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? Meaning he was making fun of it.
No,
as
he
opposed
proposed
to
it as a
confirming.
test, as a thought experiment.
But he was against it, is my point. He wasn't for it.
I don't know what he was for or against it, but if you're smart, it doesn't matter. You challenge other people's thoughts.
Right. Well, I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, no, you can be. No. What I mean is, if you're smart in the room, you can pose a question that's either right or wrong, but if it challenges other people to think more deeply than they were before, that is useful, whether or not it turns out the way you had intended.
Right.
Ptolemy's geocentric known universe had Earth in the middle, everything orbiting around it, and he came up with epicycles. It was a whole mathematical model. All turned out to be wrong.
What a dummy.
But it was fascinating. It became a fascinating model to try to attack, to see if you could find out why that was wrong. Is there an experiment that could falsify it? And so this is what led to the great insult. You want to insult a scientist? You say, your work is not right and it's not even wrong.
Ooh. Cold. That is cold. Ice cold. Ooh, it's not even wrong.
Put some liniment on that burn.
I like that.
Look, so I'm looking at your lyrics here. I'm very impressed.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm embarrassed now to read them, but I was told to, so I'm going to.
Can you give us just a few?
Well, okay, so Schrodinger's Cat, it's so dorky, isn't it? So, yeah, we wrote this song, and I guess there's a few science references in here. Well, this is philosophical. It says, like a tree that falls alone in the woods without a sound, I can't be sure that I exist when you're not around.
Oh,
From Sonia.
is that romantic or
And
what?
then,
God, wait, pause. Would you pause when you say something deep? Just give the rest of us. just.
the heliopause.
Oh, that was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
Can we hear that again?
Oh, well, yeah, that's the chorus of Schrodinger's Cat is like a tree that falls alone in the woods without a sound. I can't be sure that I exist when you are not around, Neil. I just...
I love when physics, math, philosophy shows up in an artist's creative lair. So do you think today there's more or less, or what's the trend line in the hunger people have either for art or for science or for their marriage going forward? And I say that because, for example, there are significant appearances of films where scientific accuracy was strongly valued, yet it needed an entire room full of artists to create the visuals for the stories that were told. And that included Interstellar, the movie Gravity, especially the movie The Martian.
Martian, right?
The Martian.
Exactly. Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is, are people more interested in seeing art represent science accurately than they used to be in the past?
No, I wasn't being that pedantic.
Sorry.
Sorry. No. It's just, you are evidence of this. Are you a trend line or are you an anomaly of artists
I don't really have
reaching to the moving frontier of science to serve
Just as an aside, Neil, I'm also an artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right? Well, yeah, I was going to say I don't really have my finger necessarily on the pulse of much. I mean, I have my own pulse, but that's
Is the
about
universe serving as the artist's muse?
Well,
today?
I thought about this, and I think that what's interesting is that art until Deco, I think this is true, was was always looking to nature for its inspiration. I mean, if you look at Art Nouveau, which precedes Deco, everything was flowers and trees and naked ladies. And then something happens during the Industrial Revolution when everything starts to look like machinery, and it's because we stopped looking to nature for inspiration, which I would say would be like looking to physics for inspiration, and we started getting inspired by like cars and airplanes and guns, which is why actually Deco is not my favorite period. It's cool, but everything started to look like an airplane as opposed to like a tree, you know? And so I feel like that was the time in human history when we stopped really having as much reverence for the universe and nature and for our Mother Earth, because we were no longer paying attention.
You know, most of the architecture in old New York is Art Deco, right? I mean, that's what
not as much as Florida. I've seen some serious Deco cities there. But, you know, not to knock
Florida
Deco.
has enough issues, you know, just lighten up on it.
I don't want to knock
They're going to be
Art
the first
Deco.
state to just go underwater. You know, just let's be nice
They're
to
going
Florida.
to boat themselves underwater.
Oh, no. I mean, I think that it's a double-edged sword. I think as people's interest in science and their access to scientific information through the internet is increasing, there seems to also be sort of like a reverse backlash where people are trying to teach creationism in school. Do you see what I mean? So at the same time...
I heard you, but I didn't see a cause and effect.
Well, I didn't mean it's causal. I mean, it's interesting that they're happening at the same time. So at once we're becoming more science literate as a society, we're also becoming less science literate.
But don't you think the movies can, a scientifically literate movie can help? Think about forces that operate on us in nature. I just think sci-fi films, which are hugely popular, and they make hundreds of millions of dollars, that they may be our only hope to ensure that we carry a scientifically literate community into the future, lest the absence of science literacy lead to our own extinction.
Neil, may I ask a question about the intersection of science and art? What about the reverse, which also seems common in art leading to science? From what I see in my light reading of science, a lot of science is inspired by, or scientists are inspired by things they saw as kids, like in Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever.
Battlefield Earth.
And what?
No, it's true. Like, have you guys heard of that book, The Science or the Physics of Star Trek? It's kind of dorky, but you know, it's basically what is possible in Star Trek and what isn't possible.
Is this the 50th anniversry of the original series?
Well, I was going to say.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of Hollywood or the media accurately representing science, I mean, Next Generation was pretty far ahead of its time in terms of trying to talk about real physics and wormholes and parallel dimensions and stuff. But I remember there was this controversy where there was an episode where they went back in time, and there were all these like Trekkie nerds being like, well, I looked at the stars in the sky, and the star system I calculated wouldn't have been that position of Orion and all that stuff.
Yeah!
Which I just think is so funny. But I mean, I just find it so funny to be really uptight about like, well, the plasma engine wouldn't have been this or that way, but they have no problem with the fact that they're like, you know, in space talking to Klingons. Like that doesn't seem...
Whenever I release a tachyon pulse, it's pretty much like it is in
It's
the
like,
show.
now I can't suspend my disbelief. Orion would have been slightly to the left. How am I supposed to get into this?
So
They have no life.
I must defend the Geekiverse in this moment.
Okay.
So those debates that unfold where actual known science has been attempted in the storytelling, which is why they're not arguing about whether they can have a conversation in English with Klingons.
Sure.
Because that's the fantasy side where they've stepped off the circle of science and then they made stuff up. But if you're going to say you're going to have a photon torpedo, let it have some resemblance to an actual photon and an actual torpedo, and we're going to debate that. If you're going to use a phaser that stuns you,
Okay,
what
calm
is
down.
the mechanism?
You got to calm down. Just take a breath.
If you can have warp drives, what is the warping mechanism so that you can cross the galaxy during the TV commercial?
Speaking
you
of
want to
which,
think about this.
Didn't they just make? Aren't they proposing at NASA? You would probably know about this. An actual plasma engine, which obviously would be much slower than jet fuel, but that's what runs the Enterprise is a plasma engine, isn't it?
Dilithium crystals, which I also have.
Yeah, nice. Right on.
Right. So this intersection of what artists do and what scientists do. Carolyn, you. Did I get this right? You advised one of the Star Trek movies?
I did.
Which one?
The first one, the first one of the modern era, Star Trek 2009.
Nice.
Okay, J.J. Abrams.
Yes.
So the one where they're near Saturn, hiding? No?
Oh, yes. That was my idea.
Nice.
Ooh, so
Do you want the story?
Yeah.
quick, yeah, do it quick. If you're quick.
Okay, so I met J.J. Abrams at TED. We exchanged, cards, kind of
You
thing.
gave a TED Talk,
I did.
and he heard your TED Talk.
Yes.
And he said, okay. That's what he said. Okay, go.
He didn't say it right then. We, went our separate ways 9 months later.
I have to say this. Her TED Talk, somebody used her audio
Oh, yeah.
and choreographed a little Lego woman, painted up to look like her, and the Lego person moved in Lego ways, giving the exact talk that Carolyn gave. It is the cutest thing you ever saw. Is that still on YouTube?
Oh, yeah,
So it's like Porco Lego.
She's the woman who did this. Her name is Maya Weinstock. She set up a stage, a little Lego stage, identical to the TED stage. It was magnificent.
That is so
Yeah, it
so
was.
charming.
Did
Okay,
she-
sorry,
anyway,
interrupted. Go.
Did
go.
she know we could just watch the TED Talk?
It's for all the Lego people out there.
For the Lego people. So anyway, 9 months later, I get a phone call from someone who says J.J. Abrams wants to talk to you, and I said, J.J. who? I didn't watch Lost. I didn't really, Anyway, long story short, he invites
Nobody
me.
understood Lost anyway, even those who watched it. Yeah.
Okay, so he invites me to consult on it. He was very generous about it. He says, I feel like I need to, include you in on this. I've seen your talk. I'm getting all your emails about Saturn. Come join us and consult on this. So I thought, okay, that's great. And I'm expecting we're going to have like sessions, in a big Hollywood office where we're going to be shooting the breeze and talking about the planetary scenes or something like really cool, right? So he invites me out there. Actually, I was on a trip anyway, and he says, I asked him, could I come
Out there to Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, and I wanted to see something being filmed. I'd never seen a movie being filmed before. And I was really hoping I'd see a scene filmed on the bridge, right? Doesn't every Star Trek fan want to see the bridge? Okay, I get out there and I'm watching poor Chris Pine, is that his name? Chris Pine, get the crap kicked out of him in a bar. That's the scene. You remember that?
It's a good scene.
Yeah, it is pretty good. It's a good scene.
Well, I'll just tell you, I saw this poor guy get hit in the face, fall on the floor, get picked up, punched again, fall on the table.
It
fall on the
wasn't
floor.
real. It's a movie. Okay.
But it happened like 25 times.
Yeah.
He had to go through this. So
Welcome
anyway.
to showbiz.
Anyway.
But what was,
So-
because I
I'd
saw
love to
that
see the
film.
Lego version of that.
Let me finish.
But what was real about how they hid the Enterprise on Saturn?
No, wait, I'm
What
getting
wasn't
to
real?
that. I'm
That's
getting
what we
to
wanna
that.
know.
So we break for lunch, very unglamorous. I'm sitting with Abrams, I'm sitting with the head of special effects, and we're just eating these very boring meals. And out of nowhere, he says, I've got a problem. And he says, we've got the Enterprise coming back into the solar system to save the Earth, and we got to figure out where to hide it. What do you say? So I'm thinking this is so ridiculous, but he must be trying to test me, right? He just wants to see if I could come up with any good idea. So I say the first thing that comes into my head. I said, well, why don't you have it come out of warp drive in the atmosphere of Titan, and then have it rise out of the haze, and, with the Enterprise and the rings and Saturn in the background, it'll be a really groovy scene. And to my surprise, it goes with bitchin'.
Yeah, groovy.
To my surprise, he says, oh my God, that's brilliant. And that's all they ever wanted from me.
And they sent you back.
But they used it, they did it, and then, this gets to your point. They sent me like the first draft of it, and I pointed out lots of errors. I said, well, you've got Titan on an inclined orbit. It's not really on an inclined orbit. You got the atmosphere doesn't look quite right, and the guy who does the special effects, Roger Guyette, is saying, oh, look, don't worry about it. And I said, you don't understand. people are going to know I'm the science advisor on this, and they're going to think I don't know that Titan is not on inclined orbit. You got to fix it. And he wouldn't do it. He just says, if anybody asks you about this, just tell them it was my fault. So what happens? The movie comes out, and there are blogs and blogs, never-ending blogs about what the hell did that Porco woman do? And
Oh my gosh.
Titan's not on an inclined orbit, but doesn't she know this? I mean, it was just pathetic.
That is geekitude at its
Yeah,
finest.
no, it's cool.
Sean, you think deeply about the state of the world, like all. No, that's diabolically.
Okay, sorry.
No. And so, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the role of science or art as a savior to the human race?
Well, this is actually interesting. I saw a documentary, and this is going to make sense.
We'll decide.
On New York before the invention of cars, and they had this problem where they couldn't take the horse manure out of the city without bringing in more horses to bring it out, and it was actually a disaster. Whereas if you look at brownstones, they're about 8 steps high because they started building the buildings with high steps so you could step over the manure. So it was actually
Yeah, horse will poop about up to 30 pounds of manure a day.
And New York, well, yeah.
How many thousands of horses were there in New York?
Well, that was their only form of transportation other than walking, right? So
Well, that's a bad design.
right.
Wait, so was it actually, wait, so just, you said something that I had to stop. So, of course, to move manure out of the city, you need
more
horse-drawn carriages carrying the manure, and they're pooping all the way.
And it was a state of
So
emergency.
there's some point-
It was equilibrium.
It was equilibrium. So the poop, you get the same poop to take the poop out as the poop was when you started.
There was a poop resonance equilibrium, I think is what
Yes, a resonance equal. Okay, all right.
So I mean, I was looking at this, and what's interesting is the city was in a state of emergency. They didn't know how to solve the problem, and then suddenly, I think the Model T came out, and then it wasn't a problem anymore. So I always try to, ever since I saw that, I thought, that's a good metaphor for the unpredictable nature of technological innovation. So I think we always have to account for that, even though we're looking at our inevitable demise, that maybe some scientists will come up with something smart that saves us that we can't predict.
Okay, so your solution is completely bound up in hope.
To just basically hope that, you and Carolyn figure it out.
Well, in fairness, you're also counting on alien slavery to help us.
The same guy. That was the same guy who said.
Yeah. But having said that, I did just, unfortunately, I probably shouldn't have, but I read this book called Learning to Die in the Anthropocene, which is by this guy, Roy Scranton, who is very smart. He and I learned the word Anthropocene from him. I'm sure you guys knew it already, but it's the human distinguished epoch. So it's the time on the planet that essentially has been affected by humans. It's the epoch that's the anthro epoch. And he basically says,
in other words, all other periods in the geologic history of Earth have been marked by some natural disaster, volcanoes, asteroid strikes, and right now, if you look at the signature of what's going on Earth, it is primarily that of human activity.
Right.
And so therefore, the geologists say there's nothing else we can call this but blame it on humans, and so you get the Anthropocene.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's the human-caused environmental impact and all that other stuff, mass extinction, which we are also causing. And the whole point of the book is that he served in Iraq. So he said, as a soldier, he had to learn to live with inevitable death at sort of, behind each door, because a soldier has to learn to accept death. And he also says, people like the Dalai Lama, they meditate on their death every day. So his proposition is essentially that the way the human race should be able to deal with the fact that we are causing our own extinction is to just be like a soldier and just embrace death, essentially.
Thank you for that happy thought. Yes.
Yeah.
Vanessa, do you have confidence in science?
Well, that reminded me a lot what you were saying of the finale of Dinosaurs. I don't know if you've seen. Do you remember the show Dinosaurs on TGIF?
I saw the ads.
What's it? You saw ads?
Okay.
In the finale, not the mama. In the finale, the dinosaurs die. Anyways, what did you ask?
You know what? In reality, they died too.
No. But it was a comedy. Fair, but it was like a comedy show, and everyone was having a great time. Anyway, what did you?
You can laugh about the dinosaurs dying.
Well, I'm just curious.
what-
He's preparing himself for death. What are you doing?
Like,
Yeah, what are
you
you
working
doing?
on a movie?
I do think that we should be able to just like go to another planet. Also, how
Grow
do we
another planet?
How do we know?
What good is that going to do you?
But okay, how do we?
Well,
know
if we put trout there, we'll be fine.
Well, no, Carolyn. She's saying if we mess up Earth, he'll stay here and die,
Yes,
and
yeah.
she's got a new planet.
Well, also, like,
Well,
how do we know that all the other things didn't do that? Like, we're like, oh, they stayed here and died. What if they went to like,
But think
another
about
planet?
it. We
maybe
we can't even terraform Arizona. I mean, how are we going to terraform Mars? You know.
No, John is very right about this whole idea, and let's like get with the program here. We're not going to take 7 billion people and move them to Mars. That's not what going into outer space
We
means.
only need like 2,800 of us, right? I mean, I think that's all we need.
You just
We'll
need
make
a minimum amount of really fertile people.
Excuse
so
me?
they can- All right, so you know what I wonder?
You did read my bio.
I wonder if either aliens will come help us and save us from ourselves, or whether we will invent artificial intelligence that will then solve the problems that we measly humans cannot.
Or destroy
What are the
us.
problems?
The problems?
The problems.
You don't know about problems in the world today? Do you need me to tell you? But no, here's one. The problem is we invent AI, and the AI judges that we are a virus infecting the earth, and we should be destroyed.
But that's not a real problem. That's not a real problem.
I mean, it would definitely be a problem if it happened. I mean, for everyone but John, it would be like, whatever, I learned to deal with it.
Wait, so Carolyn, if
a
that
real
happened,
problem.
that would be a real problem.
Okay, but
So what are you
before
saying?
before you get there, our core. You're a scientist. Let's dig deeper. Okay.
Let's dig together.
I think
Go.
the core of all our problems is that there's too many of us. That's why there's overpopulation.
Too
There's
many what?
Damn many of us.
Wait. So
Too many
Carolyn,
people.
wait. So we just
No.
terraform another planet, and we have two planets to
I
live
just
on.
said you're not going to transport all these.
Should we
people.
poison foreigners' food?
No.
Wait, Carolyn.
Yes, Neil.
100 years ago, and 150 years ago, and 200 years ago, people were worried, ever since Malthus,
I know.
Thomas Malthus,
Everyone-
about too many people, and the people would outstrip the food supply. Now we got the fact that anybody is starving in the world today is not because there isn't enough food. We have more food than there's ever been in the history of the world. It's a distribution political problem. So what are you worried about there being too many people? Why not innovate so that we can make as many babies as we want?
It's just like it feels crowded, Neil.
Well, no, because the population as it is, and I know what you're saying, what Malthusianism is, and it's kind of dark, but we're already just getting rid of lions and tigers and elephants. I mean, these species we can't even coexist with them
Yes,
now.
yes.
And human-caused environmental change is so extreme already that it may be irreversible. So if there were twice as many people, there would be twice as many mopeds and cars, and that's just dangerous for
And
the
twice
planet,
as much
right?
plastic. I mean, you know how much plastic
Wait,
there is in the
decade, twice as many mopeds? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
What? Is this a time
Somebody's
warp
worried
here?
about Belgium.
You say that, but in places like Malaysia, the Philippines,
I know.
China, they're all on mopeds.
I just
It's a
haven't
big
even
thing.
heard the word
All right, we
moped.
get rid of those. Who else?
I like.
Mopeds. I haven't heard the word moped in 30 years. All right, so
This is a real retro show with bitchin' mopeds. Have you seen my bitchin'
I
moped?
haven't seen your bitchin' moped, no.
Groovy, man. Groovy.
All right,
So yes, I mean, what are the problems that I worry about? You said I think deeply. I mean, certainly environmental disaster that's human caused by the Anthropocene, and I wonder also, Elon Musk and very intelligent people. It's not just a joke, Carolyn. They warn against super malevolent AI. Well, maybe not malevolent from its perspective, but from our perspective, certainly, if it decided, as you said, that we were somehow expendable or some kind of virus to be rid of. I mean, have you heard of Rocco's basilisk?
Rocco's basilisk.
Someone
That
knows.
person did.
Is that thing in Olive Garden where it's all you can eat?
It's a thought experiment thinking that if once AI creates itself, then as Kurzweil states, it'll be able to infinitely improve itself in a sort of blink of an eye. It'll teach itself how to be the most intelligent thing, at least in the solar system. And at that point, it will be essentially a kind of God, because it will, be almost omniscient. It evolves to be the most intelligent thing imaginable. Then its morality could be based on that which helped bring me about is good, and that which didn't help bring me about is bad. Because if it had a morality, it would consider itself to be the most important thing ever. And so that all decisions that led towards it are good, and all decisions that were not leading towards it would be bad. So the people who are scared of Rocco's basilisk, which is the name of the AI, are scared that it would figure out how to reproduce people through the DNA codons from the past in doctors' archives or whatever, and recreate you and torture you for eternity in some kind of weird virtual hell to punish you for not bringing it about.
I think the people who write
What was
these
he been
things
smoking
are
before this?
sociopaths.
What?
I was just using the magic eyes thing, I was back there.
So you love science, but you're like a little scared of some science.
No, but you laugh. But there are people that take it very seriously. In fact, if you go on the website that the idea was first proposed, it's now banned to speak about, because no one wants to mention Rocco's basilisk online, because it'll trace back to the person who posted it and torture them forever.
Did you just endanger us all to some future AI? You murderer!
I will delete the file tonight of this whole.
I love the basilisk.
Oh, God.
All right.
Can't wait for it.
What I want to do is give the last word to Carl Sagan. And if we can, do you have like a spot or something just to? Oh,
nice.
Okay, no, and take out the rest. Can you take out the rest?
Yeah, turn the others off.
Turn the house lights off.
Yeah, the house lights. Thank you.
Do you need a little jazz?
We will. We will end this evening with a reading from the Book of Carl. If you look at Earth from space, you see a dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever lived out their lives, the aggregate of all our joys and sufferings, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilizations, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every hopeful child, every mother and father, every inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust. Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and in triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of the dot on scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner of the dot. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. It's up to us. It's been said that astronomy is a humbling, and I might add, character-building experience. To my mind, there is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly and compassionately with one another, and to preserve and cherish that pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. Beacon Theater, thank you.
This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream, a subscription streaming service made for those of you who have no shame in your nerd game, with over 2,500 geekumentaries and nonfiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month, and for our audience, the first 31 days are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/StarTalk and use promo code StarTalk. Get curious with shows on everything from dark matter to dogs to dinosaurs. CuriosityStream is the world's first streaming service addressing our lifelong quest to learn, explore, and understand. Original content featuring Stephen Hawking, Sigourney Weaver, Michio Kaku, David Attenborough, Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, and many, many more. Available on many platforms: web app, Roku, Android, Xbox One, smart TVs, iOS, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Amazon Kindle, and Apple TV. Make sure you check out Stephen Hawking's favorite places. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking takes a flight of epic proportions to visit his favorite places in the universe. A 3-part CuriosityStream original series and an Emmy winner. Go to curiositystream.com/StarTalk for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. And for our listeners, enter promo code StarTalk when prompted during the sign-up process, and your membership is completely free for the first 31 days.